Mars in Gemini is in a mutable air sign, which is already crazy, but is the first Mars placement to introduce the element of magic to one's action. Of course, by magic, I do mean perspective, which is what mutable signs represent. The changeable nature of perspectives, and just like the wind, which blows every which way, it could represent the thought process of a Mars in Gemini taking action. This, in and of itself, makes the native very versatile and not necessarily fixed or stubborn in what approach they may take, like a Mars in Taurus native. What makes the mutable nature of this sign magical is in all of the perspectives and ways a Mars in Gemini can think to take an action. So whereas the Mars in Aries is single-minded and set on what they're going to do before they think about it, and the Mars in Taurus is stubborn towards a quality of what they want to manifest, Mars in Gemini in a moment can come up with 5 different ways to do one thing. Now, whether they actually do it and they're just going to talk about it is another question entirely. But with, placements that aid it, it could be very dynamic. And like I said before, very versatile. The mutable nature of Gemini applies the function of thinking towards one's action. So Mars and Gemini natives can think while they're doing stuff, which opens up the quality or nature of multitasking, but once again just gives one so many different options to not only think about when taking action, but while they are taking action, they can change their mind in the moment and adapt to what they're doing. This is what makes this placement very underrated, given that they're not necessarily fixed towards a certain outcome, and the adaptability of a placement like this in any mutable sign really opens up more opportunity. Mars in Gemini is an air sign, and this will now link the function of action and desire towards communicate. This is the first of 3 Mars that are sapiosexual. Mars in Gemini desires when you talk that talk. And as a Sun in Gemini myself, I have attracted natives who have Mars in Gemini, very sexy women who have this as well. But there's a reason why the stimulation of their mental will trigger desire. Mars placements like this may not even be so much into the act of physical coitus, not saying they are, as much as the talk before, during, and after. And when dealing with a Mars in Gemini, it is very important to stimulate their brain. In other words, don't be dumb. Don't be stupid. That will turn them off immediately. What Mars in Gemini wants to see is the ability to communicate one's thoughts. And this is what brings us to the individual mode and perspective of this sign. Gemini is the third of the 4 individual zodiac signs that is going to represent individual thought. And similar to the first 2 Mars, the way that they take action is going to reflect what they are individually thinking at the time, which could be anything. And that's important to understand when dealing with them. Like we'll speak on with Cancer, the fall position, where a Mars in Gemini's mental state is while they're taking action really speaks to the nature of what they're going to do. But it's also important, once again, to know that these actions come from their own individual thoughts before they're influenced by what other people may think or feel. So the positives about a Mars in Gemini, as we spoke on, is the adaptability, the versatility, and the ability to think while taking action, think before taking action, and to think up of many different ways to do something. The negatives of this are kind of related to the positives, where, in seeing all different possibilities, one can really talk more about what they're going to do versus actually doing it. This can also represent not necessarily seeing through desires like a Mars in Aries, because you get so caught up in the idea versus actually doing something. Regardless, it is a very magical placement, and it is exceptionally experienced as soon as you think about what you want to do, and now your reality reflects all the different ways you can do it. If you would like more insight on your Mars placement, hit up my website, thepeacedealer.com, and you can schedule a reading and we'll look into that with you. Peace.